idea I'm getting here. Which goes along with Justin Moore, who decapitated his FBI agent father and said he wanted Moore's militia to go take out everybody. So you have this militia rhetoric building up, which all, of course, ties into the characterization of the far right. And they take the bait. They follow the controlled opposition, and they will go into the box that they're put in, and then the entire box will take the blame for whatever psyop actors do. For example, they don't even dispute, like Laura Loomer, for example. She doesn't even dispute the stuff. She's like, oh, Justin Moore chopped off the head of an FBI agent. Look what Biden made him do. That was her response. She blamed Biden and his policies for this. All right, we were talking about the Starship launch. Here's an example. Fight the Flatter says, that's right, Flurfs. Hold in those tears as your wall, WOLRD, comes crumbling down. He can't even type straight. He's just so enraptured by this cartoon. This is like the most cartoonish cartoon I've seen in a long time. Like, does anybody think this looks even slightly real? Like, this is pure CGI. At least with the space shuttle, they would use a real model and photograph it, or use a trick, an optical illusion, where they would record the sky and pretend they're in space and that the sky is the ocean and they're on the tops of those clouds, not beneath them. They've used optical illusions, but they're still using organic, real props, real scenes, real environments. But now this is all fake. This is so cartoony. This is a step backward. Is anyone else at all impressed by this? They'll say this is an argument from incredulity. And I would say no. The perspective that they're not using movie magic enhancements is an argument from ignorance, and they don't even know they're ignorant. It wouldn't even be that. I don't know what you would call it. To not include in your assessment of anything that NASA or SpaceX provides the use of deep fakery it's dangerously naive, irresponsibly naive. Mousegate alone should have been a wake-up call, but you can't wake them up. No. What is it? It's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled, but this is a tricky one. You see, it's a magic trick, is what we're looking at. I'm just not impressed by it. They haven't upped their game. I thought the Chinese space station was going to be magnificent. I thought they would have some better special effects. But anyway, they're gloating about it, and they're saying this is making flat earthers cry. Well, I'm not a quote flat earther. I just don't believe these cartoons are convincing. I think they have a vested interest in conveying to us a false world view for mind control purposes, and nothing else. You think they only fake the news on the ground? Oh, they fake it on the ground. But everything above 62 miles, once you hit the Kármán line, oh, that's just pure science, pure truth. Why would they lie? Imagine if that was sufficient to counter any skepticism. If any liar could just say, why would I lie? Someone just lies to you, why would I lie? Yeah, I guess not. I guess, you see, and that says something about the people who believe it. Good people believe this stuff because they can't think, why would I lie? Bad people think, well, I would lie for money, power, advantage, malice, fun. There's a lot of reasons why liars lie, but people who aren't just intrinsically bad, they don't think that way. And like, yeah, I can't think of any reason why you would want to deceive everybody. No, no reason at all. And that's what you would call the consensus bias, I think. The idea that everybody thinks like you do, and it's just kind of the sense that everybody's as nice as me, which again is a kind of it's a trap. Phones are open 505 349 0420. We can talk about pretty much anything. I'm looking forward to the eclipse, mainly because it'll give us a chance to clean house. All of these false prophets are going to have to own up to it if nothing happens. As in, this will be proof that I'm right, that we're looking at when it comes to gematria based calculations or calendar dates separating events used to predict future events, I think I've made the case that what we're looking at here is the implementation of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. And if I'm right about this, and I think I am, if civil war doesn't happen on 4/8, if Trump doesn't get it, if a nuke doesn't hit, if 4/8 is nothing but people enjoying an eclipse, then I think I'll have a reasonable case to say that all of these people attempting to predict future false flags are using a fallacy, which I've already reverse engineered, and we could then make similar predictions that are just absurd and give the appearance of being correct. Dewis in Paris says, I paid my taxes, why would I lie? To me, it all comes down to the worldview in the box that we're in. And people who are in the box can't see their own box, but they can see the other guy's box. It's easy to laugh at the wokes. It's easy to look at these people heavily radicalized, but you realize that you share a box. If you're laughing at the wokes as woke, and you're on the other side, they're laughing at your side as Proud Boys or as Patriot Front. But these are identical. They're identical costumes, interchangeable, evidence of a bifurcated Psywar. And it's just team against team. Thank you, Multi-Zero Dagger. We at the IPS appreciate the support. All right, Starship launch here is a video of it. With, what, 33 engines? Very theatrical. Look at that, 6 plumes of smoke. So I'm not saying this was fake from the ground up. And I could argue, well, I wasn't there. And you weren't there, so how do you know? And some will, and I don't like that argument. I wasn't there, therefore I don't know. What we can say is that a launch happened, but we can argue on what the launch is. So I agree with you, a launch happened. I agree with you, you're Mandela affected. I agree with you, you see what you believe to be chemtrails. But we agree that objective reality exists. It's the interpretation we're fighting over. So I agree, a rocket launch happened. Question is, was it pure CGI? Since the 1960s, admittedly by the Apollo 11 launch director, the simulations have been indistinguishable from reality from the perspective of the launch control. So the control room members who are behind the screens would have no way of knowing if they're actually in space or not. It's indistinguishable, and that's from the 60s. So to think that it hasn't improved would be ridiculous. Obviously it's improved. So we have no reason to believe that anything happened unless you were there. As far as, did they actually send a big chunk of metal high up in the sky? So if you weren't there, you can't make the argument as an eyewitness. We need to break that habit of treating yourself as an eyewitness when you aren't an eyewitness. Bearing false witness. I had that image the other day I posted in the newsletter of a line of people with televisions on their backs, bearing the burden of proof, bearing that false witness. I don't. But what I'm saying is that I'm not a reality denialist. The question is, how did they simulate it? Did they use a cylindrical blimp, a rigid dirigible with fireworks on the bottom, 33 engines, and blast it up out of sight, out of mind, and then cut to a pre-recorded segment where the rocket is in space? Yeah, that's what they did. That's what they always do. Why would they have changed it? The Mousegate fiasco, which they buried, was just showing you that, yeah, the second half is all prefabricated. I can point to many other examples. There's a certain Soyuz rocket launch recorded from space that doesn't correlate to what you see on the ground. The time lapse in space doesn't even account for the gravity tilt. AnkG says, don't you know the sky is falling because Gematria told me so? Yeah, well, these anonymous doomsday prophets with their Gematria calculators can stay in Trutherville. There's a reason why I'm studying them so closely. Because sometimes I find patterns useful. And I'm like, okay, I like these patterns. This is neat. However, the problem is we're examining patterns as they appear. They're introducing more and more. And their argument is that this is so complex, man could not have done it. These coincidences are so great that only through using the language of Kabbalah and God and these mystic calculators can we see the big picture, and it's huge and it's big and it's AI, it's an alien, it's no, I'm sorry. What they're doing here is they're mystifying a very simple to understand propaganda technique, repetition. Hey, we're going to fake nuke them again sometime in 2025, and we want them to accept it as inevitable. What can we do? We'll have it in all the news have stories as a threat. Have it in all of the science fiction movies. Constantly refer to it. Put it in all the fiction, put it in all the video games, make this the worst case scenario in all movies so it's always there as a backdrop. Simulate it convincingly in a blockbuster film, make everybody watch it. Sear the image onto their minds, accompany it with the fear, give them a character like Putin to constantly dangle the nuke threat. Eventually, everybody's believing it as plausible, inevitable even. Then when they say, oh, it happened, we're like, oh, we were expecting that. They're setting our expectations. It's as simple as that. Man is writing the news in advance, and man is experiencing it. Not everybody is in the know about how scripted it is. But the scripting is easy to understand. It's just propaganda. Why would they limit themselves to real time propagandizing us and trying to convince us of things real time when they could take even greater levels of control? Editorial control. They edit, they curate our realities. But to throw in all these additional quote proofs of some kind of order is what I'd call an example of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, meaning they find a lot of hits. So if you were to take a gematria calculator and go through 1,000 Wikipedia articles, you could find 10 or 15 hits that specifically tie into what you're talking about. Now you draw a circle around that and a bullseye right there, and you're like, look, I got 5 bullseyes. I've established a pattern, and there's no way that these are in any way organizable by man. This could not be orchestrated. This is synchronicity from God or a higher power. And right there, what you do is you're like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz is real. Let's take it literally. Let's fall for the second. What is it? The second law. Arthur C. Clarke. He's like, any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. Let's just consider it to be magic. And I don't agree with that line of thinking, obviously. Like if you're at a magic show and you can't figure out how the trick is done, is your default position, oh, it must be magic? No. It's, wow, I can't figure out how they did that magic trick. So I've been looking at predictive programming and fake news for some time, and at no point did I say, this is so unexplainable that it must be magic. It must be collective manifestation. Like these are all ideas that are fascinating to entertain, but when it comes down to it, when we're actually examining the facts, Occam's razor kind of helps here. The simplest explanation actually suffices. We don't need all this extraneous stuff. All of the patterns are a testament to how scripted it is in its storytelling. I don't think we need to make it any more complicated. Moreover, I don't think we need to exonerate media. Part of this idea that all this stuff is just synchronistic and organically happening and it happens to fit these patterns is that the media are objective reporters who are just, look, events are happening, let's go record it and tell everybody what happened, let's show them. That's not what's happening. They are creating these events. They're prefabricated. It's not even a stretch to say that they write our news in broad strokes 50 years in advance. 9/11 was planned at least 30 years in advance. Not every single news story, but as an umbrella, big stories. Like for example, by 2030, climate change will be this bad, and they're projecting this from, let's say, the year 2000. By 2020, we'll have to prepare people for this big event, so we're going to have a lot of zombie movies to program people to run into their homes in quarantine. You see what I mean? If you look at their propaganda and the zeitgeist that it creates, or how it paints up the zeitgeist, you can kind of see how it mirrors, like they say, life imitates art, but the art I'm talking about here is the psyops. Life imitates psyops. And the psyops imitate the art, and that's because they're from the same place, the PSYOP entertainment complex. Mind control is really the big overarching theme here. Government, entertainment, media, academia, these are all just substrates of mind control itself. Let's go through your comments. Duos Impera says, I'm not anti-box. Look, I'm not anti-box either. I'm just not a literalist. Like, I like the Bible. I like all the holy books for their aesthetic value, the wisdom, accrued knowledge. There's nothing to hate about it, to be honest. But my argument is with religion and the framing of it and the literalism that buries, I think, what's even more profound and incredible. To me, the most incredible thing about the Bible are the astrotheological alignments. That's incredible. That's a work of exceeding genius, honestly. To be able to tell these stories using these symbols and allegories and metaphors that all relate to the macrocosmic cycles, it's incredible. Ted Stryker said, I heard a panel fell off a plane, but no one was injured. Yeah, exactly. That's the one I mentioned earlier. They didn't even know the panel was missing till after the fact, and there was not an emergency landing. And Nofal says, are they going to use the nuke to do lockdowns? I think they'll want to lock us down first, so we're all glued to our screens. Leave the world behind ends with a nuke, but the title is an anagram for Behold, the End War Live. So what I think the script is, they will use riots, they'll use emergencies of some kind to get everybody home, glued to their screens. Then they will do the nuke when we're all watching. 9/11 wouldn't have succeeded if we had all slept in that day. We have to be synchronized. That's the key here. They can press a red button and they can reset our reality. The 1946, we know what the nukes did. They obliterated objective reality. The introduction into our collective psyche, into our collective worldview, the world annihilating atom bomb obliterated objective reality. It'd almost be like, hey, we have a new God. We'll just this new God manifests as a mushroom cloud. And if we don't obey this God, we're all going to be destroyed. So we all have to organize around our fear of this new God. Well, nobody would believe it because we're not superstitious, right? Wrong. And what they have done is they have introduced a God that science can identify. Same thing with 2020. They brought us a devil that even the atheists will believe in. It's a construct. Okay, moving on here. Dwayne Garrett says, I'm convinced they steal fanfic conspiracy theories and use them against the people who create and believe in them. Essentially, they're writing their own horror movie. Yeah, they take inspiration from us. Well, I've been reading up on this concept of hyperstition, and I think it has great explanatory power for what we're talking about. Because what you're talking about isn't that what we believe becomes real. I mean, 7 billion people believe man landed on the moon, and it's still fake. Yet, it exists. It's real in our worldview. It frames the collective accepted frame of reference and all the art that's created, all the science. Everything's in that box. We live in a propaganda box. I mean, some of us have transcended it. Some of us have stepped outside of the screen. Some are still saddled, anchored to a few narratives, tethering them to the false construct, but they're cutting away, I believe. We are a breakaway ecosystem. But this idea of hyperstition suggests that if something doesn't exist, but a lot of people believe it's real, and they're given a lot of feedback to reinforce it, and they act as though it's real, it becomes real. Every single religion, you could say, is an example of this. And it doesn't even have to manifest in an actual like egregore, like something is actually there. But the belief in it creates the infrastructure for it, and most people get their reality secondhand anyway, so it might as well exist. It's really incredible, the power of belief and the thrall it has over man, over humans, over how we're just subject to this stuff. You see why non-believers are, I think, ubiquitously hated. You see, we're not conspiracy theorists. If you're a skeptic, if you're an auto-hoaxer, you're a non-believer in the de facto state church's mythologies. You don't trust their priesthood. In fact, you don't believe in their God construct. You're an atheist to their false God, and they hate you for it. I mean, look, they try to take away your free speech, a fundamental human right, and they want to cover your mouth. When I first saw the face diaper, I was like, yep, that's an emblem. It's a symbol, it represents something here. And it's about not spreading those mind viruses. Only state approved mind viruses. And you don't need your face anyway, because if you're going to emote, we have a wide array of emojis here to express yourself with in a safe way. And of course, we have inclusive emojis, pregnant emojis, mpreg emojis, but any emojis that are deemed offensive, they obviously are going to pull. So what they're doing is they're giving you approved emotions and emotions that are non-approved. We have to do it for safety's sake. Mind masking. Angst G said, did Boeing really put a hit on their whistleblower? It appears to be so. I mean, what is that? I heard that story. You had someone from Boeing, an alleged whistleblower, and he said something along the lines of, if I die, if something happens to me. A Boeing whistleblower found dead after raising concerns. This was 5 days ago. John Barnett found dead in the U.S., raising concerns about their production standards. The 62-year-old had died from a self-inflicted wound on 9 March. They just confirmed it. He worked there for 3 decades. He said they had been fitting substandard parts to the aircraft production line. That was back in 2019. And there was something more recent he had said. I'll see if I can find it. But there is talk here that he's a whistleblower on this. Again, I think it's a psyop. I think it's the media being selectively attentive to it. Possible drills. All this stuff could be conducted by drills. Live drills. Those people on the plane, you don't know. Could be a bunch of actors. We got to have a drill where we drop this and test the response. I'm going with real until proven fake, and if you know something I don't know and you want to share, call in and let us know. Yep, I have reason to believe this is real. But those of us who have been very doubtful and skeptical and who suspend judgment have been vindicated so many times. Okay, moving on. Again, the story of dead satellites falling to Earth. I was reading some of this article, and it's not even believable to me. Some of the quotes in here, some of the things they say. I was shocked at everything that I found. Nobody was studying this. It's really alarming. Private satellites have caused damage and have already caused issues for astronomers, but the key word here is private. You see, we're talking about the richest men in the world screwing up space for the entire world, for everybody else. But I was going through some of the pull quotes. I have some quotes here for you. I was going through this article, and some of the statements they make seem like hyperbole. We've never seen this. But what they're saying is that all this spacecraft dust, all of it's going to end up interfering. Says the increased levels of radiation could strip our atmosphere. Good to know. Musk, again, scraping away at the atmosphere, even as this spacecraft dust is tearing away at our skies. His mind junk is tearing away at our mental atmosphere. That's the point they've been making. Now, I've been saying, too, that this Starship, this is my prediction. It's going to be one of two things. Either they're going to succeed in sending 1 million glurfs to some subterranean, deep underground Mars base in China, or they're going to load up a bunch of, obvious actors into a Starship, and we'll have a Challenger/Titanic-like event in the sky that will kill the desire for space migration for the next 1,000 years. Which will really take the pressure off of the NASA CGI department. They must be so stressed trying to meet our standards. Dewis in Paris says, it must be quite a power trip to be able to create everyone else's perception of reality. Absolutely. And religions have been doing this forever. Religions have always been able, when I look at the black monolith, I look at that as the screen, which that's actually what it represents, the movie screen, the merging of our reality with the state constructed internal reality. So your internal worldview is augmented by what they give us. And we have been studying what they give us, and it's all mind warping Psywar, puts us into a alternate reality game. But you could also look at a holy book, and it's interchangeable. They all do the same thing. It could be everyone live your life according to Dianetics. Everyone live your life according to the Quran or the Book of Mormon. And you go down the list, and there's basically a worldview accompanying each one. And if your basic premise is everything in this book is necessary to know, everything outside of this book is heresy, we don't need to know, and you create a closed system, you would have completely different results. These are world views. This is like a doomsday cult in a bunker. It becomes an echo chamber, and of course, these, like a church, for example, for a temporary time on a Sunday, becomes a literal echo chamber where it's only about what's in the book. You're not mixing it with other stuff. And what I'm suggesting here is that worldview creation has been one of the main ways that the power elite have organized the masses forever. The lie world order. The movie The Village shows this perfectly. The elders lie and say, oh, we're not in the 20th century. This is like 18 something. And there's nothing outside of this village. Just some wicked people out there. And then they build an entire world where they're happy. They are living this idyllic lifestyle with no idea of the horrors of modern life, which they have been quarantined from. But what we're seeing now is the new universal religion is being implemented through the use of mass media, and the media itself has become the de facto state church. That's been my premise for some time. Space as the new heaven, because it rises above all of the various, local competing versions of heaven and paradise. And space is a heaven that the atheists who embrace scientism will also believe in. It's a total power trip. It's this mind control. I think it's a greater power trip than just having access to a big bomb that can blow everybody up. No, they have access to reality control, the ability to fake something into reality, perception management, including billions. I mean, this is a high-tech religion, is what it is. So here's a conversation I had with Psy Girl in Gilded. Just a few points here. Psy Girl says, media narratives may be fake, but corporate state extortion and the omnipresent threat of coercion and state violence is deadly real. Let's see what it takes for the kinetics of a credible threat to manifest on the streets. Now, I agree the narratives are fake, and fake has trumped real. They can use the fake stuff to influence reality. But do the fake things ever become real? Does it ever go kinetic? And this is where I say no. I think the reason why is that we've already been conquered. We're already an apathetic population, and there's no chance of everything falling apart because everything is under total control. Like, oh, they're going to get our guns. They already got your minds. They don't need your guns. And if there was a time to do so, if there was a time where, oh, look, they instigated so much that it's going to go kinetic, it would have been 2020. The MAGA would have risen up. They'd be like, let's stop the riots. But no, everybody just sat and stared at their screens. And there's one other point I made here. Psy Girl had said, I care less and less about the narrative and more about the things like the price of gas, safety of the food and water, taxes, local reports of car theft and carjacking. What me worry. And I can agree with that. The real threats are always there. And those are the ones that matter, not the ones that are fabrications and hyperstitions. And we also have to remember, too, that fakery controls this reality. So we can't dismiss that the main instrument of control is worldview fabrication and the fakeability of anything. That is one of their main powers. And in this regard, we've been talking about X and Musk and mind junk and mind control and how this is a new system that's really built on the old system being updated. And if you look at the iconography, and I'm always talking about Noah becoming Noah, but look at the symbol of the cross or the X and the dove, and juxtapose it with the symbol of the Twitter bird and the X. And what I'm suggesting is that these are both emblems of the state religion and its mind management. And the whole idea of Musk taking over X has everything to do with his role in the space program. He's the Martian Pope. We're entering into this new age, and the fact that he's the owner of X and the guy who's the first colonizer of Mars has everything to do with one another. We're talking about the new world, the new starting point. When we go to Mars, we're going to have to shed a lot of the things that have been detrimental to our life here on Earth. So on Mars, you're not taking a carbon footprint. You're not taking private property. You can just go down the list. No MAGA hats, no AR-15s, no big trucks. There's a lot of things that aren't going to Mars because we have to purify and find the perfect and sustainable way to live. Similarly, they had to get rid of heretical texts and apocrypha from the Bible and streamline it into one simple worldview. Well, what X is doing is it's going to do for our commons, our shared cyberspace, what the Mars base is doing. It's going to offer something sustainable and safe that does away with anything that would in any way threaten its perpetual survival, which means we have to get rid of hate, for example. And even though Musk is here opening the floodgates to hate, I think ultimately he's a fall guy for free speech. And they're going to say, look, you let the richest guy in the world ruin outer space with all this space junk. You let the richest guy in the world destroy this public town square, this public commons. Okay, moving on here. Toronto police tell residents to leave their car keys by the front door to avoid confrontation with thieves. Quote, they're breaking into homes to steal your car. They don't want anything else. So this is a new auto theft. It says prevention tactic, but it seems like enabling tactic. Yes. They're coming to steal your car, and if you have your keys in your bedroom, you might unnecessarily confront them. So just put your keys near the front door. You might even want to label it.
Advice for all vehicle owners. A message echoed by Toronto police speaking at an Etobicoke safety meeting last month. Constable Marco Ricciardi had a new message for vehicle owners who keep their fobs in Faraday pouches.
To prevent the possibility of being attacked in your home, leave your fobs at your front door. Because they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else. A lot of them that they're arresting have guns on them, and they're not toy guns, they're real guns. They're loaded.
That's why Galinsky says they will be installing the door stops and taking YPR's advice seriously. But she'd like more action from police.
All right, there you go. Do they have any helpful advice that would make it easier for pickpockets to get into your wallets? Very interesting. Maybe we should wear our passwords on our shirts. Our maybe even our keys for our different crypto wallets, because you wouldn't want someone to be inconvenienced while trying to mug you. And they get mad, and then it escalates. You got to appease the irrational and the violent. Isn't that how we keep things civilized? Aaron Rodgers responds to claim that he's a Sandy Hook conspiracy theorist. I hate to even say SH because I get ads from SH parents, and they're like almost targeted. They're almost targeted, like, conspiracy theorists have ruined our lives. Will you donate money to us? And I'm like, you're wasting your ad money on the wrong person here. Like, I'm not talking about it in the same way that you are all talking about it. Dimitro 101 says, put all your valuables in a basket and leave it on the deck. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would just leave the keys in the ignition. All right, let's move on here. Look, I've dealt with this stuff. I mean, this is real. I've never seen a chemtrail, but somebody stole my catalytic converter. And then they came back and they tried to steal my car. And they actually try to hotwire it. But I have a club. I'm in the club. I have one of those wheel locks. And if someone steals my car, they will send me $2,000. Like they're so confident that nobody can steal it now. But we've had issues with that here, and that is real. Like I'm not a denialist. I do believe that I know for a fact, I mean, that there are psychopaths, that there are unbalanced people who do represent a threat to us. But I do not feel threatened by any of the media constructed bad guys out there. I'm not worried about bowl cut shooters, for example. And if you subtract all of the things you're supposed to fear from nukes on down, you're not really left a lot of things to fear. And what's so bad about that? Is it that you're not in a state of readiness at all times? Do you need to be? I would say no. I think part of the purpose of the PSYWAR is to keep you cowed, to keep you on edge, to keep you in a defensive crouch, like being God-fearing. I was never God-fearing. I mean, as a kid, I thought the concept of God was scary, that he's reading my thoughts and all this stuff. And later, though, I started thinking, why should we fear God? Why should we live in a state of fear? And, I read that sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and you can see where people would arrive at this. Like, it's pretty terrifying from that perspective, but I was never really a God-fearing person. I feel like that's just a way for the church to get in your head and the pastor to make you think you're in the end times, so why invest in the future? Just give money to the church, etc. And they can keep this racket going on indefinitely, and they have. But then I think this may be the same tactic where the media wants you to be globe-fearing. You better recycle or globe's going to flood you. But if you don't believe in Gaia or climate change, they have alternative fears. So in all senses, you are always in a state of fear. It's about to go kinetic. It's about to end. The sky's about to fall. This is the worst time ever. It's about to go down any day now. FCC denies Starlink low Earth orbit bid for lower latency. So here it's already happening here. Space Wars. Elon Musk wants to launch more of his Starlink satellites in the same area where the space station is. Kind of close. It says here SpaceX may not deploy any satellites designed for operational altitudes below the ISS whose orbit can range as low as 370 kilometers. So far they have 6,000 out of 42,000 they want. What it says here, if you fill that region with tens of thousands of satellites, it'll put a bigger squeeze on them and compromise your ability to serve the space station. So Musk is about to block access to the space station. That's what they're worried about here. Now listen to this. There's a persistent stream of things coming down like old CubeSats and debris. It's a constant rain coming down. There's a constant rain of dead satellites. It says here, even if you're below the ISS would be within range of debris clouds for a collision at 350 kilometers. You would have a very violent collision, and that's what we're looking at here basically, is Musk is possibly going to get in the way of the ISS. So they can't let him put his stuff there. Aries 1 became a member. Blue Wrench Lodge. Thank you for joining. And if you don't know the history of the Blue Wrench, when we started this conversation in 2016, 2017, the Infinite Plane Society chat room, I realized that this whole area of discourse was targeted by trolls and a lot of just people acting in bad faith who were just disruptors. And I thought, we're engaging in it's fun, but it's also kind of serious. So we do have a point here. And we don't need distractions from the points that we're trying to reach. We're trying to get to some understanding. So we needed quality control. And I was too busy to moderate every troll, and I didn't want to constantly spend my time calling out trolls. So what I said was, here, everybody who's part of the IPS, who accepts the premise that everything is fake until proven real, that we can't trust the media at face value, etc., if you're on this level, have a blue wrench. You're a moderator. So we had a chat room full of moderators, hundreds, at one point, 400 wrenches in the room. And the rule was, anybody who comes, we have enough people. We don't need anybody else at this point. So if anyone shows up, ban them immediately. And if they really care, if they really want to be a part of this discussion, they can email me at infiniteplanesociety@gmail.com. I will pull them out of the dungeon and give them a wrench. So every new person would show up, get banned, get pulled out and then be moderated. It became kind of a hazing or an initiation, but it was quality control. That's what created this think tank, because now we got rid of, and it wasn't about everybody agreeing. We just got rid of people who weren't there for constructive purposes. And it used to be highly disruptive. If you weren't there in the early days when the topic of NASA criticism really started blowing up, you couldn't have calm conversations. There were roving bands of trolls, and you don't see them anymore because they've been smashed into pulp by red wrenches. Many of them turned red, or blue wrenches turned red. We were basically at war with trolls for how long was it? Like a couple years before eventually a lot of them joined us. A lot of the trolls began to see the point. Not all the way. I mean, some of them are still, clinging to certain things. Richie from Boston says that he's found proof straight from Noah. Now, he's not talking about Noah with the ark and the dove. He's talking about Noah with Arkstorm that uses a dove as a logo. NASA's NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who tell us that if we don't change our ways, globe's going to flood us. Oh, you can laugh. You can laugh at Noah, but you won't be laughing when the ark doors shut. So this is an example of an old, ancient, archaic myth repurposed and served to the cult of scientism, and they believe it. This is ironic. The people who don't believe in God, who laugh at your silly Noah's Ark myth, they laugh at the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, because he believes there were dinosaurs on the ark. Like, it's funny that he believes in the ark. It's funnier he believes there were dinosaurs on the ark. And if there were dinos on the ark, where are they today? They would have survived, right? Did they not procreate while they were at sea for 40 days? What did they do with their time? But what's funny is the people who laugh at that, oh, arks are funny, God flooding us, oh, that's funny, that's Sunday school stuff. They believe in their new flood myth more than normal Christians believe in the ancient flood myth. Like they take this one literally. So you have the myth literalists in the myths of scientism laughing at the people who look at myths as myths. Like, nobody really believes in Noah's Ark, like, literally. But people believe in climate change, literally. And I'm saying these are identical, they're interchangeable. One of them represents the progressive, new utopian view of the world, and the other is from the more traditional view, based on the old school fake news. Commenter says, I have not seen any of the so-called elites. Maybe they all have gone. Well, you wouldn't know. Like, oh, George Soros, Elon Musk. Like, who are the elite? When we talk about this group a lot, and maybe it's useful to point it out that we don't know. You can't point to any ethnicity, any country. All we can point to is the infrastructure of mass mind control, which would operate the same no matter who's in control. Could be Satan himself. He's the director of this thing. We're seeing everything through his viewfinder. Or it could just be a department of NASA that has central control over worldview. But the elite are the entrenched powers that write history, that always have, that have final editorial control, and that ostensibly control media. But it would be who controls government, because it transcends media. It's bigger than who owns the media. Like I said earlier, media, academia, entertainment, these are all just subcategories of just mind control itself. Even government is mostly just a mind control illusion. There's no real power for you in it. Think about it. Every single politician believes in the fake moon landing. Every single politician will walk the party line when it comes to the official worldview approved for history. And one of my contentions here is that we live in a news-bent reality, and many characters we can point to, like Donald Trump, for example. Yeah, he lives, he breathes. There's a real person there. However, he's a reality TV show actor, and he's living out a role that was already created. He's in a very important historical role as a historical personage, but he's not rogue. He's not a loose cannon. He's not doing his own thing. He's in a Truman Show, but voluntarily. He's not tricked. He's insulated, sure, but he's in a reality TV show acting out history that will go down in the books. Like, what I'm saying is, they do have a great deal of control over our reality because they write our history as we go. I mean, what is history but media going back in time? And Nulfo says, well, there is an ethnicity that controls both government and media. Well, that would be the red herring. Because if you fall for that explanation, you will fall short of seeing the big picture. Like, oh, well, this little group controls government and media. Well, you could say that, and you might find a lot of content to reinforce it, but then you miss the bigger control, which is bigger than any one group. And the people who fall for that fall for everything else, meaning they don't know the news is fake. That's why I don't even platform or talk to or spend any time talking to people who think they figured it all out, and it's like, oh, we can blame it all on this group. This group did 9/11. I'm mad at them. You're mad at Israel for doing 9/11. 9/11 was a bad movie. So you're mad at them for a bad movie, or you're mad at them for blood. You think they killed 3,000 people. Because if you think they killed 3,000 people, you are in the MSM box, and your opinions are invalid. And still, I think what we're also not really clear on is we don't have enough information to arrive at that conclusion. The whodunit red herring chase never arrives at the what is it. I've never met somebody chasing a red herring, a scapegoat, who knew how fake everything was. In fact, they're the ones who are saying it doesn't matter that it's fake, or it's inconvenient to their worldview that it's fake. In fact, one of the most vocal opponents to what we do here has always come from the Nazi types, because they don't like me saying nobody died at fill in the blank, specifically 9/11. Because if you say that, then they can't be mad at their chosen scapegoat. They can't claim to be a victim. Anyway, back to Richie from Boston, who has chemtrail lung. He says he's been sick for 5 days because of chemtrails. Not from the vape. Yeah, he vapes. He's a chronic vapor. I look at his Jeep. It's like, did somebody spray chemtrails in there? Nope, it's all his vape. But no, he's sick from the clouds, not from his vape pen. But he says, I got proof straight from NOAA, which is like saying I got proof straight from NASA. They control the weather exactly like we have been telling you for over a decade. So Richie from Boston has adopted what I call alt climate change. He's a chemtrail Greta. They control the weather. But again, this is a bifurcated Psywar. He leans right, so he's not blaming capitalism or Republicans or fossil fuels. He's blaming secret government because right wing is anti-government. Left wing loves government. They hate the private sector. They hate capitalism. So left wing says they are screwing up the weather, but they blame, of course, capitalism, free market. All right, here it is. Elon Musk running an advertisement for the future Mars bases.
Hello there. I'm here to show you a wonderful place. A veritable Camelot of the nuclear age. Not made by God Almighty, but the working man. You can be a hero by purchasing a residence in a Vault-Tec vault today. Because if the worst should happen tomorrow, the world is going to need you to build a better day after.
Okay, this is from Fallout, which is about to be released. It was mislabeled on the tweet. It's not a literal advertisement for Mars bases, but it pretty much is. And Fallout takes place in, I believe, Vault number 33, interestingly. It says the end of the world is not what it used to be. Interesting. Again, Vault 33. Now, it's not the same as Sub-Level 33, where they keep Godzilla. But what is it with this Subterranean 33 thing? Brandon MDM says the old everything bagel. I just watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. I've been having some strange synchronicities ever since I watched Griselda, and I was commenting on the scene where the character is reading Labyrinths by Jorge Borges, and he's got a scorpion on his hand and a watch, and he's talking about breaking the cycles of time. And I'd correlated this with the death card, the end of a cycle, and the cycle, the sickle, the circle being all correlated in this concept of linear time being habit more than a necessity, but only a habit for those who don't make conscious decisions to break the cycle, to diverge. And the book Labyrinths that the character was reading delves into this idea that the decisions that you make create an entirely new reality. Like, we're not in one reality that we're all just sharing, but that every choice is a different turn in this labyrinth. It's an interesting concept. So I'm talking about this, and then somebody said, you got to read this book, Reality Transurfing, which is this philosophical book on choices and probability and about intentionality and synchronicity. Things I've been kind of connecting here. I've been suggesting here that synchronicity itself suggests that we are in a cybernetic system, that we're like bats using echolocation, that our intentionality projected into the future, into the potential, has that whatever we're thinking about, if you have any kind of meaningful correlation or synchronistic event, you could consider that feedback in this sense. So I've been discussing these things, and someone says, you got to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I did, and it's a crazy movie, but it lives up to its title. But it really delves into this idea of the choices that we make and the splintering of reality, but it suggests these different realities all exist concurrently. And this is kind of what I've been arriving at lately. I've been saying that I don't believe in the universe in the sense that it's described to us. Like, we have the rear view, mirror view of it, and then we have our future concepts of what it could be, but I'm not entirely convinced that it exists until we experience it, and that until then it's just dark matter, nothing but that we are faced with all probabilities and possibilities equal distant from us at this moment, but we go on this linear path more or less out of habit and because we're steered with this massive hive mind they've created. But we've been discussing these things and synchronicity and how it all does tie in to the elite's symbolic system and how their main deity seems to be Saturn, the god of, time and constriction and judgment. We're talking about time and the material realm, so time and space. And synchronicity is all about being in the right place at the right time, which has to do with your own decisions and choices and how things unfold. But anyway, I watched that movie last night. I would recommend it, sure. I mean, I had to watch it in like 3 different sittings. It's pretty intense. It's actually quite funny. It's absurd, but it's profound as well. Mango Penguin says, great movie. Well, here's another point about it, though, because I mentioned when I was talking about this last week, I mentioned the movie Free Guy about NPCs in a simulation. And the Free Guy begins to wake up when he begins to make choices, even meaningless choices. Like, instead of wearing this suit, he's going to wear this one that looks the exact same, but it's further down the closet. Instead of turning left, he's going to turn right. So he starts breaking his pattern. And the more he breaks his pattern and exercises will, intentionality, the more reality opens up to him. And he enters into a reality quite unlike his programmed one. Like the Truman Show, breaking out of the Truman Show. Well, what was the prison there? It wasn't physical bars, it was habit. Habitually going along with the program, listening to the lies, not going outside of that echo chamber. So Free Guy was about exercising free will to break free of this false paradigm. Truman Show was the same thing. The false man became a Truman. And in the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, in order to access improbabilities, the characters would have to do really strange things, like absurd things. To get out of a tight situation, one had to give herself 4 paper cuts because the probability of getting 4 paper cuts is just so minute that it opened up this access point to access this other timeline. And that sounds absurd, but it's really no different then sorcery, magic, lucky charms, crossing the fingers, all these irrational things. And in the movie, they make the point about the less sense it makes, the better. And it's because you're breaking from the conscious mind, the left brain stranglehold over reality, and accessing not the solar of the conscious mind, but the lunar side, the unconscious, the lunacy. And this is all part of alchemy anyway, the worldview of having the solar and the lunar, the two aspects of the mind, and how in order to do magic, one has to delve into the dark. So this movie had some correlation, I think, between basic concepts of probability manipulation through what we would call magic, sorcery. Fascinating stuff. Dewis in Paris says, we'll have to watch that movie, my kind of thing. Yeah, it's really incredible. It really is. I was really I mean, look, it has some parts in there I couldn't even describe to you without sounding insane, but it definitely follows the title very well. Isabel N says synchros are an extraordinary to get your attention. Dwayne Garrett says chaos magic in a sense. Yeah, the premise behind chaos magic, as really, I think the group is called the IoT, the Illuminatis of Thanateros. They separated magical traditions from the mythologies, from the Judeo-Christian framework, and just went to the fundamentals. Like, what are these so-called magicians doing in order to, in their view, change or influence reality? And when you break it down to the fundamentals, the techniques, it seems like everything has to do with, according to the theories behind chaos magic, distracting what it calls the psychic sensor. Your sense of things as they are, your worldview that's more or less cemented, the way you see things out of habit, and how do you break that? And it suggests you break that through what you would consider to be ritual or other means. Sigil magic, for example, all presupposes that you can send a message to your higher self that isn't bound by time-space, that can give you access to these improbable realities. But the only way to get that message in is to bypass this filter that maintains order. So to access the chaos, how do you bypass it? And there's a whole list of techniques or practices from, like yoga, meditation, but most of these involve altering one's consciousness. Mizell says it'd be fun to have a movie night. Yeah, I always thought we used to actually do that. We used to watch a few movies, but it's very useful to watch these movies critically and see what you can extract from them. Like, I happen to enjoy the propaganda. Knowing what it is, it doesn't detract from my enjoyment of it from the level of aesthetics. I mean, these actors are good, the art is good, the music, it's all really good, but it's all just obviously it has a higher purpose, or whatever you want to call it, an ulterior purpose. Thirst super chat $9.99. Appreciate that very much. Thank you for keeping the gas in the tank. Dewis in Paris says ties into the concept of us being given their mind. Maybe the left side of our brain is there, used to co-opt our creative right brain. Yeah, I happen to think that much of the programming, especially when it comes to archetypal symbolism, colors, a lot of the stuff bypasses our conscious recognition, and we wouldn't be able to focus on it all. We would go crazy. Like the Truman Show, when I watched that, it was kind of a paradigm shift for me, because I realized that there's a layer of meaning to movies that you couldn't possibly expect the general ticket buyer to pick up on. So I thought either these are Easter eggs meant for the amusement of a few, or, and what I arrived at later, we're downloading all that crap into our deep mind. It's all forming the infrastructure of our worldview. And it doesn't matter if you pay attention or not. It's all building up there. And what I mean is, if your subconscious isn't separating real from fake, now you have scenarios in your head. Falling buildings, falling planes, infected people running around, and you have to hide in your homes. So you fill up your imagination with this without your conscious mind even recognizing what you're absorbing through repetition. And then later, They frame something in the news in a certain way that accesses memories in that same filing cabinet that bring back the same emotions, that the imagery corresponds. So I kind of think that we're always being programmed. All right. And look, and I've looked into hoodoo, folk magic, various varieties of it from around the world. I've always found it to be very interesting. Superstition has always been interesting to me, what they call superstition. But what the chaos magic movement did is it took away the literalism. Like, no, there's nothing intrinsically meaningful about a bag with some coins or some stuff in it, some oils. Like you have all these like mojo bags, for example. Like this is just a collection of random objects in a bag in one's pocket. It can't possibly have any kind of qualities to it. It's not magic in that sense. But the idea here is that by having these symbolic objects put together in a certain context by someone that you believe has some kind of power tricks your conscious mind that knows better into temporarily becoming superstitious. In fact, I've heard this referred to as the suspension of, I think it's the suspension of disbelief. So the suspension of disbelief is a prerequisite for believing in things that are, or rather for bypassing your conscious mind's stranglehold over reality and allowing your subconscious to have some kind of perspective, whether this manifests as intuition or your attention being drawn to things in a synchronistic way that leads you to certain choices. But we're talking about accessing realities that aren't immediately visible to you at your level of conscious awareness. That's really just your awareness is derived from your senses, your terrestrial survival, but your intuition has more insights according to this concept of magic. But that you can't access that unless you can somehow defeat your ego. Brandon says, when faced with a paradox, one should get paradoxical. Dwayne Garrett says, constant programming. You either program yourself or allow other people to. Yeah, that's absolutely the case, that the programming is by default. Next comment says, I don't watch their movies. They are violent, dystopian, and very depressing. That's absolutely the case as well. And it's not just in the movies, it's in the music. I look back at music I used to listen to, and you might like the music because of the sound. Maybe you like heavy guitar and drums and all this stuff, and you listen to it and you go back and you're like, well, what was I actually hearing in my head? What was being repeated? And I'm like, wow, this is just like CNN with guitars and drums and snares and scarier aesthetics, but they're just talking about the world ending, man deserves it. A lot of repetition there. And when you see the news, then, like, let's say you're not a news consumer, but you get your entertainment, your media from other sources, and then you watch the news and you're like, oh, look, the sky's falling. And you're like, yeah, just life is imitating art. Art imitates life. But I don't really feel like it influences me. I'm too optimistic. I don't believe necessarily that even the worst projections they give us are going to manifest as such, even though we may internally accept it. I mean, I go outside, I enjoy the skies. I think it's beautiful. I like the long plumes of ice, the condensed ice, the condensation, the contrails. But then others go out and they want to mask up and put on PPE and wear an umbrella and start carrying a sign saying the end is near, genocide, they're poisoning us, we're all going to die. I'm like, well, look, we're experiencing the same skies, but you're having a stress attack. I'm feeling aesthetic arrest. Like psychosomatically, you're killing yourself. You're giving yourself chemtrail lung. All right, moving on. Here's another example. This is Fight the Flat Earth gloating. Today has been a bad day to be a flat earther. You guys can deny reality as long as you want. It's not going to stop coming. More and more space flights, moon base on the way. Becoming an interplanetary species. You dumbasses can stay in the dark ages. We don't want you with us anyway. Feelings mutual. Go to your deep underground Mars base. Go deeper into Plato's cave. You're already in one mentally. Your internal worldview is a Plato's cave at this point. Now, you want to go into some deep underground Mars base. Now you're in a literal cave. Go, please. We don't care. This is so ironic, the lack of insight here. I'm not denying reality. I'm not saying reality doesn't exist or it's not as I perceive it. I am rejecting augmentations. I'm rejecting their hyperstitional reality. Yeah, it's confirmed by everything you see in the media, but for me, from my perspective, it's flat and stationary unless I consult your magic screens, unless I listen to your priesthood. So I'm not in denial. You are augmenting your reality because you cannot see any curve. You cannot feel the earth moving. Everything you claim to know is coming through that filter. So I'm not a reality denialist. I'm just not a reality augmenter. And they don't really have a position to be saying that we are somehow lacking or deficit or somehow in any way missing anything. Like they're adding to the picture here. Eventually, though, something's going to happen. They're going to have to provide a very convincing moon base. And if they do, let's say they have a moon base by next year, it's going to be the same. It's like with the ISS. It's going to be terrible special effects. It's going to be those of us on the ground calling it fake, and they're going to say it's real. They're not going to improve their special effects. Dwayne Garrett says moon base will never happen. Well, chances are, if it does happen, it will be beneath the surface. Same with the Mars bases. They have to terraform first. They're not going to be bouncing around on the surface. And they may actually do robots to space first. I mean, drones, cyborgs. Why would they send real people? They will come up with some reason to not. All right, moving on. We talked about the subway event. Is it fake? Is it real? Honeybell said they have a whole police precinct in the same exact station. Again, that's another indicator. It's probably hoaxed. I'm going to watch it again. But the guy who shot the man won't be charged. We'll find out what the story was. I thought he had shot himself. All right, I think I want to skip over this last story. CNN did a breakdown on chemtrailers, but there were a couple of points here I thought they made that might be worth repeating here. And it's stuff that I've observed, but this is fascinating because they're using the term believers in the sense that I use it. And it says the collective agreement within these communities overpowers the rational dissent of scientists. This makes it exceedingly difficult to factually correct or alter these deeply entrenched beliefs. Now, you could take this statement and replace the word scientists with skeptics, with auto-hoaxers. The collective agreement within these communities, we'll say the communities of moon believers or moon landing believers, all these people who believe in outer space, for example, their collective agreement overpowers all rational dissent. Same for every other issue. The collective agreement is really the dominant factor here. It's a belief-based worldview, and the hive mind nature of it can't be understated. We all lived through 2020. Commenter says, we don't know who they are. Maybe they are us and we are creating them. I try to stick to, right now we're dealing with a propaganda war and a universal media and a universal government, which is the universal religion. Beyond that, it's interesting to try to determine who's behind it all, but the common threads: Mystery Babylon, the Earth God motif, the obelisk to rocket, the concept of the cycles of life and death, the descent into matter and transcendence. There's a story here. Who's behind it 100%? I don't know, but that's something I'm comfortable saying. Like, I don't know. That's why we're doing this. If we knew everything, if we had all the answers, we wouldn't be here every night trying to find the answers. We're not smugly sitting atop of a bunch of explanations handed to us by the lying media and lazily just accepting what they've told us. No, we're actually doing the work of questioning, suspending judgment, and taking responsibility for those questions and finding the answers and recognizing the boundaries between knowledge and belief, and not claiming to know things that we can merely conjecture about. Like, this is really the most honest place in the world right now, if you ask me. Because the other people who know what we know are part of the lie world order's infrastructure. The people on this side of the screen are the deceivers, the operatives, at various levels of awareness, but they're all doing so in bad faith for the purposes of manipulation and mind control. And here we are for the purposes of, I guess, education. We are trying to inform ourselves. We are in, good faith using the same information, but we're not gatekeeping it. We're not obscuring it. We're trying to elucidate. So yeah, this is the most honest place on the internet. Way more honest than Trutherville. Isabel Ann says, I can see it being very easy to run a NYC subway psyop. They block off entrances all the time. Well, a couple of years ago, when the prophet of doom, Frank James, shot up the subway with 33 rounds, there were no cameras on that cart. Like, how does that happen? No cameras? It wasn't recorded? There's a link in chat if you want to join the Parallel Media community on X. Again, we are outside of the alt media, which is controlled. We are in the parallel media, new terrain, outside of their control, outside of the bounds of their controlled opposition. They consider this area to be toxic. They won't come out here. And we need to continue to move out this way, further and further away from Trutherville, so we can see that those with 1 foot in Trutherville and 1 foot stepping into skepticism are going to have to make the choice. Are you going to stay in the matrix, or are you going to step outside the box? My objective is to get 10,000 of us on the same sheet before the election, and I think we can make that happen. All right, this has been great. This is Where's the Curve? I'll see you all in Folded.
Upside down and zoom in on the people walking round. The people walking round upside down. You got a balloon, I got a balloon. Boats reappear with zoom, they reappear with zoom. The horizon line is flat, center sky it looks the same. Of my senses.